Thank you for joining us for this hustings. I'll just give a quick overview of who I am and who I am. So my name is Funmbi Adeagbo. I'm a worker. And I'm campaigning for the RIBA Presidency. I am part of the JTL, which is the Just Transition Lobby, which is a loose collective of people working across different organizations that we campaign for three major points. One being the climate change, the climate emergency, one being the working conditions within the industry, and the other being the EDI, so inclusivity, diversity and access and accessibility. Also on the RIBA Council, for anyone who didn't know, got elected last year again as a kind of a move to make change. My campaign this year for presidency is based on the concept of value. That means value to ourselves, interpersonal value of architects within the industry, value to clients, value to and us valuing the environment and the world that we live in. If you don't know, I'm also an international. I came to the UK as a minor and studied here as an international student. My trajectory kind of has been a very mixed one, full of challenges, and in doing so, in coming up to this point where I've actually been able to be given a platform and collaborate with different people, I just want to be a champion for the international voices, which sometimes don't necessarily get heard and might feel a bit estranged from the RIBA. I don't know if anyone here has read my manifesto. The key things that I am campaigning on for the presidency and will be championing on the presidency is giving a voice to the underrepresented, and that includes everyone who is underrepresented within the institution or within the industry, from different perspectives, whether you are ethnic minority or coming from a different socioeconomic background. We have problems within this industry that need to be addressed, and me campaigning as a worker is kind of championing that. I'm working with a collaboration of different grassroots different grassroots groups to kind of make a stand that we need change, and we need change to happen right now in this industry. For far too long, things such as the environment, the climate emergency, and how we work as architects have been not valued to the extent that they should, which has then had a detrimental impact on others. With other parties, we need to kind of, as architects, be activists. We need to be standing up for the things that we believe in. We need to be firm in our stance, and we need to be actually practicing what we preach in terms of design and how we design. And furthermore, we need to be collaborating with as many different groups of people in order to address the global issues that affect the industry and the planet. I will probably leave it there. I'm sure there'll be loads of questions. Very, very happy to be contacted or in any shape or form, or LinkedIn if there's any specific questions. I'm sure that we'll have a very lovely discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Funmbi, for starting it out. It's never easy being the first one, so well done. Duncan, over to you.
Yeah, hi. I think I'm going to speak for longer. So I was given 10 minutes. So but yeah, please, Brigitte, tell me when. Yeah, just do that when I need to stop. But I just want to thank Brigitte and Acan for this opportunity. Yeah, my name's Duncan Baker-Brown. I'm an architecture tutor and practitioner and researcher, and for the last 30 years I've focused on sustainable closed-loop systems and architectural practice. For the last 3 years I've been involved with the RIBA. I was one of those regional practitioners. I'm based on the South Downs, just north of Brighton, who wondered what the RIBA did. So I got involved with the council, and I currently co-chair the Climate Action Expert Advisory Group. I also sit on the steering group for the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, where I represent the RIBA, and I've been to the last two COPs, the petrol state COPs. There's a third one coming up this December, so they're really challenging COPs. I feel now that I understand more about the RIBA. I've decided to run for president, and it's not a decision I take lightly. but I do feel like my extensive experience has given me an opportunity to have a good go at it, to make a positive impact on our industry, one that I love and that has given me so much back over the decades. Nearly 40 years ago, when I was in my late teens, the first time I went to the RIBA was as a student activist. We occupied the RIBA because it was proposing to support, or had said it would support, the closure of 3 schools. Since then, it's been the place that I've gone to see amazing lectures. I've been lucky enough to, 30 years ago, win the RIBA House of the Future, which is an off-grid sustainable house of the future, which we built in 1994, and that helped me set up the practice. But for the last 30 years, as I said, I've taught and researched and practiced together. My manifesto goes some way to explain what my priorities will be if I get the chance to be the next president of this fantastic community of nearly 50,000, can you believe it, 50,000 members, including 16,000 students and 5,000 colleagues across the globe. Being an architect in the 3rd decade of the 21st century is challenging. This much we know. However, it can be a lot of fun, a force for positive change, and enormously rewarding. I feel that my particular and diverse experience being an advocate for climate change, climate literacy, as well as climate justice and social justice, lends itself to the particular and numerous challenges presenting the RIBA today, as well as our profession and the whole of the construction sector. The good news is that everybody's talking about the climate emergency, even in our industry, even if our politicians aren't. However, I could waste a bit of time describing the numerous challenges the RIBA has at the moment, including those that appear to be self-inflicted. However, what has struck me more over the last 3 years are the big positives it presents and perhaps doesn't make enough of. For example, it has very many knowledgeable, talented and supportive staff working very hard on our behalf, nearly 300 of them. In addition, in my recent travels across the UK, Europe and the last 2 COPs, I can't help but notice that the RIBA has a lot of respect. People want to engage with us and its representatives. It opens doors and has the potential to be an impactful lobbyer on our behalf. More recently, I've been inspired by the progress shown within the institution around issues of equality, diversity and inclusion, as well as an understanding that there needs to be a just transition and and access to the huge opportunities our green industries will provide. And so, to be clear, I'm very keen to build on the work of our current president, Moiwa Oki, as well as that of our recent past president, Simon Alford, who really did steady the ship. Despite these positive aspects, there's no getting away with it. At the same time, the RIBA is investing millions in the major refurbishment of its headquarters at 66 Portland Place. It has lost contact with many of its members, especially since COVID, the regional cutbacks that followed, and the ongoing student debt and staffing cutbacks in academia. If I get the opportunity to run for president, I will focus on the following issues with all members in mind. Firstly, just in case you're not aware, when one of us wins this election, we'll be president-elect for a year before we actually get to be president. And during that year, what I want to do is to travel to all the regions to meet as many members as possible. As the director of a small regional practice, as well as an employee of the University of Brighton, who rather unkindly put me in a redundancy pool for 5 months last year, I know what my experience is and that of local people to me, but I want to learn about the experience of others and let this information draft my biennial plan. As president, I will ensure that the RIBA shines a bright light on the huge opportunity that is the creative adaptation of our built environment, so it's fit for purpose, accessible, affordable to occupy, low carbon, healthy, and crucially, climate resilient. This will include highlighting best practice across the UK, whilst lobbying government to legislate for embodied carbon benchmarks in building regulations and support a stable and expanding retrofit industry. I believe the RIBA can help us all do this. One of my main ambitions is to get the whole of our membership engaged with this massive opportunity for work that a creative and diverse approach to retrofit presents us all. We have an opportunity to lead this embryonic industry. It would be a massive loss if we leave it to others to see it who see it simply as applying external wall insulation and solar panels to our homes and workplaces. On education, I studied part-time for my degree at what was North London Polytechnic, now the London Met, whilst working for an architect 4 days a week. I came from a working class family without the money to support me in my degree. However, studying part-time gave me huge opportunities and set me up very well, but it was hard and I ended up with a lump of debt, a bit like most students have today. In addition, in my capacity as Principal Lecturer and Climate Literacy Champion at the University of Brighton, where I currently run a Master's Architecture Studio, I'm very much aware of the huge challenges presented to all our students and academics trying to navigate their way through increased debt, having to hold down jobs while studying full-time, reducing staffing numbers, and the need to make sure we are teaching and learning the right stuff. I will be lobbying RIBA to be a louder and more present voice in the current and future discussions with students, employers, ARB, SCOSA, and emerging architects about making our wonderful subject more accessible to as many people as possible, whether they want to work or have to, part-time or not. We need to spread out our community of learners much further. I want to support small practices and early career architects. Running a practice of any size has never been easy. I will work to make sure that RIBA has small practices in mind and develop cost-effective access to the current unaffordable MBS, as well as better and more affordable professional indemnity insurance. We also need an affordable way to train and sign up to the RIBA Principal Designer Register, the Conservation Architect Register, as well as the forthcoming Lead Carbon Design Register. A great idea, but where will small practices find the money to sign up? We're often wondering whether we're going to sign up to the RIBA at all after we've paid the ARB. There's a lot of well-informed discussion about how architects have lost ground to other consultants. I believe there's still a strong case to protect the function of an architect. Recent updates in the Building Safety Act, the housing crisis, as well as huge challenges presented by the climate and ecological emergency, need the creative and diverse solutions that architects throughout the world bring to a challenge. Given the support of the RIBA, we can convince clients and governments of the value of what we do. In addition, RIBA needs to protect the right of early career architects by ensuring that chartered practices always pay their staff for what they do. No free overtime, no free internships. Incredibly, 2024 marks the 30th year that I've been a director of a small regional practice while teaching and researching at the same time. A practice that I'm very proud of, and proud to say that we were B Corporation certified last year. And if for those of you that don't, but I guess most Acan people know, that basically means you're committing to putting people and planet before profit. For the same amount of time, I've been teaching, researching and campaigning and writing books, raising awareness of the amazing work architects are doing to ensure that the built environment reduces its negative impact on our precious planet. In that time, I feel I've gained a substantial amount of experience across much of the learning, education and practice of architecture in the UK and abroad. This experience and the relatively high profile it's afforded me across the different parts of the construction sector will serve me well if I get the chance to represent the RIBA as its next president. I hope you agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Duncan. 9 minutes in, very good.
Oh, I had more time.
Yeah, you did. You've got another minute. You're free to use it. Well done on condensing all of that in such a small amount of time. I'm sure that will lead to many questions. Following on, Chris, would you like to take the mic?
Thank you. I have so much to thank the RIBA for, and I have the energy, enthusiasm and experience to get it to where I believe it should be. I would ensure the RIBA does more to enthuse and encourage students and the young architects of today. They need it more than ever. There are many times in our life when we all need help, whether studying or in the various phases of our career. Young architects deserve a much stronger voice. Not to concentrate solely on youth, but if we put the right support in place for them, then the whole profession will benefit from the same processes. I joined the RIBA as a student and was chair of the architect student group at Leicester Polytechnic, where I met Andrew Weston. We were put together for group projects based solely on alphabetical order, but found we had mutual interests and different but compatible skills. The energy crisis of the late 70s piqued our concern for finite resources, which has guided our careers since. I won the InPlan Award run by Tarmac to promote energy conservation, and Andrew won the more glamorous glass and glazing competition judged by Norman Foster. After working in New York and then with Michael Hopkins for 5 years, with Andrew at Richard Rogers, we put all our competition work together and were selected for the RIBA 40 Under 40 exhibition in 1985. At that time, the RIBA was a lively, vibrant institute and made it a rule to put at least one young practice on every shortlist, which I think we all benefited from, if not directly, at least getting the opportunities was encouraging. Instilling hope and optimism is vital to young architects. The president at the time, Michael Manser, was so kind to us and encouraged us to start our business. His journalist wife, Jose, also gave fantastic advice and guidance. We were working in Andrew's living room on homemade drawing boards, trying to match our previous salaries and trying to build a business. One of the best things I did at that time was a part-time MSc in project management, which helped enormously winning work. It's one thing being able to design, but another to manage and coordinate projects. I took full advantage of the RIBA helpline and got great advice from insurers, from lawyers, and other experts. We were also invited to give a lecture at 66 Portland Place. And although, like most young architects, we were always scrabbling for work, we were enthused to keep going. The RIBA was also a fraternity, and I'm still grateful for members who asked us to work on competitions and projects when we were struggling, help which I will never forget. At a time when interest in architecture and the environment is at an all-time high, I'm seriously concerned that the RIBA won't survive another generation. You might think that sounds melodramatic, but young architects don't appreciate its relevance. They don't see the need to join, despite the great advantages of learning and collaboration, and the support it can offer practices, large and small. As a membership organisation, if you don't have members, you don't have an organisation. Since I decided to stand, my inbox has been full of concerns and complaints. Often the complaints are unjust and a result of poor communications. Architects are busy, and much of the good work of the RIBA is largely unappreciated. Nevertheless, simple things could make a difference. Having an efficient helpline would be hugely beneficial to members. I'd like to see customer care for members taken up several levels. There needs to be an injection of energy and enthusiasm in the RIBA to reflect what is happening in architectural practices around the country and abroad. Many large practices, for example, employ an in-house sustainability expert across all projects. Smaller practices and sole practitioners simply can't do that, so the RIBA should help. We must overhaul one-size-fits-all CPD. We need to allow architects to develop their own career path and widen learning options. We have some of the best and most respected education establishments, and I've discussed with online providers how to ensure learning modules are robust, educational, relevant, but also entertaining. Part 3 could follow the same process and allow examinations and retakes at a time and place of the student's choosing, which I think will reduce stress levels enormously. There can be too much focus on London. As I mentioned, I was involved in the East Midlands region when I was a student, and I've been impressed by the passion of architects in the regions ever since. It's essential for architects to be involved in their community, to understand concerns and influence change at local level. The RIBA should be the first port of call in addressing local challenges, harnessing architectural expertise to address relevant issues such as flooding, decarbonisation, infrastructure, conservation, design and planning decisions. I recently bought a derelict church in my hometown in Derbyshire and converted it to a community arts centre. I had 90 architecture students from Nottingham Trent University doing a project looking at turning Ilkeston into a creative hub. So I know the energy there is in the regions, and the RIBA needs to support it. I propose more money to be retained locally from members' subscriptions to allow them greater autonomy. There's enormous enthusiasm in the overseas chapters for the RIBA too. I recently visited the Gulf chapter and was impressed with the level of activity. The RIBA needs to work with other well-established bodies, such as the Commonwealth Association of Architects, to tackle global issues, and the Institute needs to support this with financial help, creating a like-minded global community. My passion, energy, and enthusiasm for architecture has never waned. I remember running towards the Centre Pompidou when it came into view because I was so excited to see it for the first time. A few weeks ago, I got the same feeling travelling around in a minibus for 4 days with 4 other judges visiting 16 exceptional projects, chairing the RIBA Regional Awards. Most of the arguments amongst the 5 judges centred around sustainability and the different approaches each architect had taken. The RIBA is home not only to some of the world's best designers, but also experts in housing, social care, health, education, transport, infrastructure, heritage, sustainability, and so many other subjects. And they are passionate about their areas of expertise, yet the RIBA isn't involving them. We make a grand occasion of installing honorary fellows, but then don't involve them either. But they're keen to be involved. We need to be much more strategic about collaboration. I would pair our architectural experts with the relevant ministers and use our pool of talents, create good relationships with all decision makers at all levels, regionally, nationally, and internationally, and make climate change the centre of that collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Also exactly at 9 minutes. Very good. Thank you to you 3 for presenting yourself. Very well stated. I'm going to open up the floor for questions. We have received a couple of anonymous questions directly to us, but also please do feel free to write directly into the chat. So to start off, anyone from the candidates is welcome to answer, but the question is, what is one biggest issue you think needs to change in our industry, and how will you, as RIBA president, help to solve this? Is there someone who would like to go first? Duncan.
Yeah, for me, we're on the verge of getting embodied carbon legislated for, and as soon as we are measuring whole life carbon properly, we're benchmarking it, and we're realizing how small our carbon budget is. The industry will be in the world of adaptive reuse, and that is a huge emerging industry. It is not an industry really at the moment, and what excites me about it is the radical drop in the consumption of resources, but also the huge opportunity is for architects, because we need a creative response to this. So I think it's a huge job opportunity for us. And at the moment, there's not quite enough work for us. We need something to be getting on with, and it's the best opportunity for us. So I think for me, and we're on the verge of that happening. You know, in the last 2 years, the whole life carbon bill has been presented as a 10-minute bill to Parliament 3 times by Tory MPs. And so who knows what world's going to be like after July the 4th. But I'm hoping we might be in a world that's a little bit more climate literate.
Excellent. Thank you, Duncan. Chris or Funmbi?
Sorry, go on. Yeah, go on, Funmbi.
Sorry. I saw
Sorry. I think the biggest issue with the industry, I still come down to it, and it is my campaign point, is value. And it's a holistic view of value. So do you value each other in terms of us not undercutting each other or diminishing the profession? Value that we need to maintain, we are expected to maintain literacy and competency, so we keep up to date with all and access all of the resources, but also value that we, from, like, for example, how do you communicate that value? I think if we can solve the problem that affects all of the things that we see in the industry, from low fees, you know, the worry of the principal designer legislation coming in that people don't believe they can come up to it, the insurers not being willing to insure us because they don't believe. If we can address that, and that's not just in a sense of bureaucratic, it's more of a cultural change, that we finally come together and say we're not going to accept anything else but the best value for ourselves individually as people and as professionals. I think if we can actually get and instill that in every single member of the community, we will be able to tackle the majority of this. We will be able to have those difficult conversations with clients where they want to put profit above people, because we know that our services are invaluable to them, and we will be able to actually start to actively address and act on all of the things that we have already loads of skills, already loads of knowledge, already many members of the community putting forward proposals. The key thing and key sticking point is that there is that lack of community value understanding and a baseline that we can actually then work together instead of working against each other. I think that is the biggest problem in this industry. And it doesn't matter whether you are a worker, whether you are someone who runs a business, as soon as you start to see value in each and every member of the community, you then become a force that can actually start to enact and change good. And we see this in all of the movements there's many examples of this, where communities come together and actually agree and work for the same cause, rather than, varying cause. I think that is the biggest problem that we have in this industry. It's also a societal problem, but in terms of running for the RIBA presidency, I see that as the role of the RIBA president, being able to instill that they have a platform to be able to demand more from those outside the industry, but also to encourage people within the industry to emulate that, because that's what the president is their figurehead.
Thank you. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for architects is being undervalued. I think there's a lot we can do about that ourselves. We need to demonstrate the value that we have. I mean, when you look at the RIBA survey every year, people do value our design. The feedback is we are great designers. We don't necessarily manage projects very well. We've got to get better at that. And we've got to get over to people that we value their commitment to a project. I was incredibly reassured by visiting those 16 buildings last month for the RIBA Awards. Not only the great design, but the respect that all of the clients had for their design team. So we are doing a lot right. We're not getting that message across. When I was chairman of the Architecture Centre under David Rock's presidency, we were going to embark on an advertising campaign with an advertising agency called Collett Dickinson Pierce. And we were going to promote regional architects and the broad depth of work that gets done around the country, not just the brightest and not just the Sterling Prize winners, but good everyday architecture. A change of president meant that didn't happen, but I think something like that is essential. I think first we've got to reform our lifelong learning, so that we can prove to people that we are the best in the world with the highest standards, the highest knowledge base on climate change, on sustainability, on ethics, on pay, on everything. Once we've improved our lifelong learning, we can then embark in an education program to prove to people that we are better and we deserve better pay than people that aren't RIBA members.
Great, thank you. I've also just realized that I was typing some of the questions out. So apologies, excuse me. With some of the questions coming in, there's a few paralleling, so I'm going to have to paraphrase some of them. We have a couple of quite interesting and challenging questions. So one is, what will the candidates do for the many of us outside of London? What does accessibility mean to you, and how do you envision the RIBA addressing this? Who would like to tackle this first? Funmbi.
So the many members outside, this is a problem that I have seen being repeated in council as well. And it's also something I've experienced being an international member of the community, in that it's very focused, it's very London centric, but it's also very Britain centric. And the RIBA is proud of its international connections, but that actually needs to translate more into engagement with those regions. It needs to translate into empowerment and giving people the ability to speak for themselves and have their own identity that is proudly both the identity associated with the RIBA, but proudly acknowledging all of the other things associated with them, the individual cultures, the individual characteristics of, and the individual things that each region brings that is different and unique. As president, the next president will be coming into the time when the 66 Portland Place is closed down. And I think one of the key things that we'll need to do is just really focus on decentralizing it. I think also involving young people who can contribute to the discussion, who have a good understanding, involving people who are local to all of these regions that can talk in their unique dialect and talk about the things that might not necessarily be as sterile or clean cut as what we're used to, but those are the conversations that need to start happening in order to bring people in. You have to meet them where they are. You have to let them be themselves. And as president, that will be the top of my agenda, being someone who's probably not typical as well. I have no reason to not embrace the difference that we have, because I am different, and this is one of the key things that motivated me to join the race, was that appreciation of difference and being able to communicate with people in such a diverse. I'm actually part of since I've been on council, I joined the EAG that specializes in finding out architecture. It's one of the key things that we've been trying to bring attention to, is that we need to be engaging people in the different walks of life, different aspects. When you adjust the idea of EDI, it's not through a single lens, it's intersectional, and we need to start bringing all of these things forward. And I also have been participating with my local chapter and groups as well. So these are things I'm already doing in the short time that I've been in the RIBA, and my hope is that as president, I will carry on and expand and build on that, because it's something that I'm exceptionally passionate about for the community.
Thank you, Funmbi. Chris or Duncan, do you have an answer to the question?
Bridget, could you repeat the question again?
Yes. What will the candidates do for many of us outside London? What does accessibility mean to you, and how do you envision the RIBA addressing this?
Chris, do you want to go? I've got that now. Or...
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, I as I said, I was involved in the East Midlands region. Was my introduction into the RIBA when I was a student, and I know from my work in the East Midlands, and I teach in different universities around the country, what passion there is in the regions and what great work they do. And we were all up in Liverpool a few days ago, and the energy and enthusiasm in the regions is fantastic, and they should be given more autonomy to do their own events and to have their own budget. I think the feedback that I get is there's too much central control, and a bit more devolution would go a long way, and that's what I would work to ensure happened, and spend some time with the regions. I think it's important to be seen and to take part in all the events that they organise. And as regards the international members, I was vice president of the international committee, and I know that we're pushing at an open door. They all want to be associated with the RIBA. They think, wrongly in my view, that the CPD programme is brilliant and want to take part in that. And I think we could use that to create a really great global community by having online CPD programs which are specifically targeted for all the global issues that we face, sustainability, urbanization. There's a lot we can learn from each other, And the more we know about local issues around the world, we can all try and put our heads together and solve them together. Thank you.
Okay, Brigitte, I think I've sort of got this now. Yeah, locally, what I already do, I'm based in Sussex. Like tomorrow, I'm hosting the RIBA mock interviews for our undergraduate and postgraduate students. So we've got 30 architects coming in. So we facilitate that for the afternoon. So our students get an opportunity for interviews. But until recently, I was running the sustainability group for the Southeast region. And I also host the RIBA mentoring scheme. So that's mainly how I get to speak to other local architects. But because I'm lucky enough to have funded Interreg, that's EU funded research projects, I regularly go over to Europe. And so I get to talk to architects there, and I get to meet RIBA members there. And at COP, actually, I get to meet the AIA as well, which we've got the American Institute of Architects. We've got a memorandum of agreement the RIBA has with them. So from at one level, I feel I'm getting out there. But for me, accessibility is for my students. I've got students studying, majority of my students studying full-time, and I'm teaching master's students mainly at the moment. They're studying full-time, and they've got 3 or 4 day a week jobs to maintain while they're trying to study. So I'm asking them to do 5 days a week of work, and they can't. So for me, we need to set up a different structure so our students aren't saddled with debt. They're not trying to hold down almost full-time jobs where they're doing full-time courses. For me, that's one of the biggest things. How do we negotiate our way through the RIBA Part 1, 2, 3 without enormous debt, but also letting them have the time to enjoy the practice of architecture, learning it and doing it properly, so they've got time to do it. And I have to say, since Brexit, the demographic, the nationalities of students that we get at Brighton is different. We don't get the European students that we used to go. It's such a shame. We've got other nationalities, which is wonderful, but really it is very difficult. There are issues beyond the practice of architecture, beyond the RIBA, that are undermining the way we work. And it's not just for our industry, it's lots of industries. But I'm really heartened by the discussions going on at the moment within the RIBA, within council, with our current president, Miwa. I just think the RIBA is a transformative place at the moment. I'm feeling particularly optimistic about it. I think the closing down of 66 Portland Place for 3 or 4 years is a huge opportunity for which either one of us becomes president, because we will in effect be forced to be regional presidents, because we won't be at Portland Place. And in my manifesto, I talk about this idea that we would rotate the budget that's normally for 66 Portland Place for hosting events, etc. We'd rotate it around the region. So it's picking up on an idea that the Football Association had when they were rebuilding Wembley Stadium. It's suddenly the Northeast or the Northwest got the international games, and it's great. So it would be an opportunity to shine a light on the regions for, say, 6 months at a time, and they could handle bigger budgets to have the best events. And as was alluded to earlier by Chris or Funmbi, it's not just the prize winners we want to shine a light on. We want to shine a light on the amount of talent that's in the RIBA, which is substantial.
Thank you, Duncan. The questions are now coming in fast and furious. So absolutely no reflection on how you've been answering, but since we have so many coming in and at such a pace, I'm going to ask the candidates to try to be succinct also with their answers. Moving forward, there's no reflection onto how you've been answering up to now. Next question coming up, it's a challenging question. Increasingly, climate change activists are recognizing the inherent interconnection of the colonialization and genocides taking place in Palestine with ecocide and the climate crisis. The RIBA so far appears to have been silent on the atrocities being committed to human life and the environment in Palestine, in sharp contrast to the robust statement of support to Ukraine following the Russian invasion. If you are elected as the RIBA president, would you seek to maintain the silence, or would you advocate for a different stance?
I can't see why we can't say what we think. I mean, I think free speech is a wonderful thing. even if it irritates some people. The more open debate we have, you shouldn't, as president of the RIBA, I would like to be able to say what I feel about those issues and be open and honest that they are my views. I'm not representing the RIBA, but the RIBA would give me a voice, and I think that would be an important thing to say. I think the more people say what they think, and the problem these days is you don't seem to be able to have a nuanced debate with anybody without being closed down. But I think it's important to express our views on important issues like that.
Thank you, Chris. Funmbi?
Absolutely. I am someone who comes from a country that we have similar issues, and we see impoverished communities being rolled over by the I'd say the wealthy class or the upper class. And this is something that I've grown up with as an awareness. I do not stand for any sort of human life lost for profit or for any, for me, the atrocities that go on in the world are not something that should be ignored and should be silenced. I've signed an open letter as a member of SOAR against the current situation in Gaza. I always stand with people when we are in situations where there is loss of life for other agendas. There is no excuse, and our work that we do as architects, we need to be reflecting on that. This is my personal opinion, and this is where I stand, and that will never change regardless of what position I am putting. As the president, I will maintain my voice. And I don't know how best to answer the question is yes. Obviously, the RIBA has to have a certain, as an organization, will have to have certain there's certain criteria that it needs to meet. But definitely, as the president, or let's say as myself, who has been elected to president, I will stand and speak against people. I don't believe in silence, and because you've been given this is a platform to be given, and you should be speaking for the just. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going last on this, but yeah, I can't believe the RIBA hasn't said anything, made a statement. So I actually don't know what's going on behind the scene, but I do know that I would make a statement which is clear around this. It's despicable what's going on at the moment, and it's going on around. No, it's not just in Palestine; it's going on in other parts of the world. And I think the way I often fold it into what we do is by getting people to think in terms of where materials come from and where they end up. And I said it recently last week. I said it's very difficult to design and construct a building without using child slave labor at the moment. We've just got to say these things out loud. And if we ignore these things and worse, even though I can't think of anything much worse than child slave labor, we're just, we will not get any type of progress. It's interesting that ecocide is something that's splitting the industry at the moment. I really think we need to sign up to there is a definition of ecocide and the avoidance of it that the EU has come up with. Sorry, I've forgotten the actual name of the statement now, but certain colleagues of mine are lobbying the RIBA, including myself, to acknowledge this, and we're not getting very far at the moment. However, I would actually say that while I've been on council, it's been rather low profile, maybe deliberately, I don't know, but we have reworded the purpose and mission of the RIBA to put people and planet first. And if I become president, we'll be changing the charter as well, which is more like a 3-year exercise. But that charter is out of date, and we need to put people and planet before profit.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Duncan. Moving on swiftly to the next question. Some RIBA branches are really struggling, and it's not for lack of funding. RIBA recently doubled funding for branch activities. What will you do to invigorate dormant and underperforming branches? And how have you engaged with your local branch? Funmbi?
Chris can go first.
All right, Chris?
I'm out most nights at some event, either at the Architecture Foundation, the NLA, there are so many nimble, lively organisations in London, in contrast to what the RIBA are doing. There's hardly any architects. I go to the RIBA, I hardly ever see another architect in the building. It's full of dentists, doctors, lawyers, accountants, having conferences. That's what we've got to change. And regarding the refurbishment of 66 Portland Place, it's a fantastic building, but I'd like to see more detail about what we're actually going to do with it, how we're going to make it work for us while we're spending £50 million of members' money refurbishing it. We planted 16 cherry trees outside our office, and we had more public consultation than has currently gone on about 66 Portland Place. But I think as I said, I had 90 architecture students in my community centre that I run in the East Midlands. I think all of these vibrant, small community groups show how you can punch above your weight. The RIBA doesn't. It's a £20-odd million turnover business, but it has no outreach, and that has to change. We have to get more visibility for all our experts across the board, for local issues and for national issues. And in the branches and the regions, that means visiting them, giving them help, maintaining that energy and enthusiasm, and making sure things happen. It's not rocket science.
Thank you, Chris. Funmbi and then Duncan.
Sure. So I'll say a very short story. I was the first member to join my local branch. This was back in 2000 when it first set up. This was a Southeast London group. At that point, just an enthusiastic, fresh part 3. I just passed my part 3. Now that I'm on council, I've been lucky enough to be back in that same local group, which I attend as regularly as is feasible. I think the reason why many of these branches don't have the energy is that it needs to be reciprocal. They need to feel that the efforts put in by volunteers is being appreciated by the wider organization. You have many people giving up their time for free and not necessarily getting any of the rewards of that. So this is something that needs to be addressed. Another thing is to break it down again, as I made with my point earlier, that it needs to be local. You need to hear the voices of the people in their own dialect. It needs to be something that people are feeling comfortable while still being part of the larger organization. So if you want people to engage, you have to let them engage in the way that matters. Do things that are meaningful to them and engage local students. And also one of the things that is lacking is an awareness that there is a lot of stuff going on in the RIBA. It's not very well publicized, especially in the education. I'm on that committee and been in contact with them. They're doing a plethora of things, but nobody knows about that. And this is a huge problem. It's a problem with communication and making sure that we are reaching people using the right media outlets and media sources, that we will get those people back into those things and get them interested in architecture. But also they have to feel like they've got some sense of ownership of that. And I think that is the best way to rejuvenate branches. You can throw money at things, but if the people aren't committed, it's exceptionally hard. So how do you breed commitment, making them feel like they've got some ownership of that?
Thank you, Funmbi. Duncan?
The problem with going last is you're just going to repeat, but I'm not going to repeat much apart from I do think to invigorate struggling branches, I think you just got to put the different communities together, and by that I mean the community of practicing architects, but also the academic and education communities as well. So I did an event in at Christmas in Brighton, and one of the reasons it was a lot of fun is because I made sure about 50 of my students turned up. Not many of them were really invited, but they got I got them in, and they just if you get the younger people with older people who are perhaps not feeling as enthusiastic about life as they should be, young architects and student architects really enjoy the opportunity of meeting people in practice. And so I think we need to have better events, more celebratory events to remind ourselves what we're all about. Yeah, there are there are branches that are doing very well. And so it's really disappointing to hear that there are some branches that are sort of fading out there. I mean, again, that's why as President-elect, I'll be wanting to go out to all the branches to find out what's really going on. I've got a long track record of organising events. You know, for 10 years, I organised 3-day symposium at Future Build. It used to be called Eco Build. And, you know, I'd get 60 speakers over 3 days from across Europe talking about the climate emergency and closed loop systems and the circular economy, and involved over 1,000 people. And that included, as you know, I got politicians with students and practitioners, consultants, clients all together. You get people from all different backgrounds together and all different practices together, and you tend to have a lot of fun. So I just think we've got to network more and get out there more. And after that, I'm just repeating what Chris and everyone else has said.
Thank you, Duncan. Moving on swiftly. Sorry, we've got so many questions here. Another very interesting question. Primary caregivers benefit from remote, hybrid, and part-time hours. How are you going to support primary caregivers? And will remote, hybrid, and part-time working hours be a part of this?
It's a great question. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, Funmbi might have a different answer, but it's very difficult to legislate for every architectural practice in the country. I remember when I was at Michael Hopkins, 3 or 4 architects got together and said, we want to have collective bargaining. And that didn't go down very well. I think there are certain guidelines that the RIBA can put in place, but we should be lobbying government for those sorts of solutions.
Duncan?
Yeah, I think post-lockdown and COVID, for me, that's a lot of people's experience of a sort of hybrid working. So I don't know if many people are going into work 5 days a week now, but that might be different for some people's experience. But I know for a lot of people are working when they can, and working, and by that I mean they're not having to stick to the same fixed hours every day. It's about getting the work done. So I mean, I've got concerns about not work coming into the office at all because of isolation, etc. But I think if you're a primary carer and you're an architect and you want to be involved in the world of architecture, we've got to be able to support you. And I think it's for obviously employers to work this out with their employees, but actually a lot of our practitioners as sort of SMEs and even, you know, smaller practices of 1 or 2 people. So for me, it's I come across this all the time. There are people who've got challenging primary care situations, and they've also got their own practice, and yeah, it's working long hours.
Thank you. Funmbi, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I mean, the working conditions is something that I've been campaigning since I've been on council. This question really it's about inclusive environments and inclusive workplaces. When we look at the culture of architecture, we're at the moment not very inclusive, and I think it's about creating cultural change and people understanding the difficulties and working with their colleagues. As the others have said, it's about getting the work done, not about how many hours you're in the office. And what we lose so much by not having a diverse pool of people in the workplace, and that even affects the design. When you have the people who understand different scenarios and you're designing something, that it adds an additional level of robustness to whatever discussion is happening in the room. And not being able to support people who have specific needs, that might be, again, they're a carer or they have different physical ability, and that might be neurodivergent. We need to start creating a culture in architecture where people are willing to understand and listen and work around, so that they get the value out of each member of staff. Because that person who is not in the office, because they have care and things, when they are there, they're bringing a level of creativity to your space and problem solving that you might not have thought about. So we need to start working with these things rather than looking at them as problems. Is work smart. So offering flexible working, while it might not be possible to mandate it and force people to do that, it will be definitely something that I will be promoting. I'm already promoting that as we speak. So yes, absolutely.
Can I add one other point, Brigitte? Sorry. It's a separate point, but it's also a design challenge. You know, our built environment isn't really fit for purpose, I would argue, post-COVID. Our domestic environments are over-occupied, and our commercial environments and working environments are under-occupied. You know, we need to acknowledge this. The way people work and play is different to it was 5 years ago, fundamentally.
Excellent point. Thank you. Next question. I particularly like this question. How will you engage with groups such as Acan, Architects Clare and Letty in pushing for change in legislation? How do you see us supporting you in delivering this?
Well, I think Duncan and I, and my practice, we're both signatories to Architects Declare. There's not an awful lot of engagement, I don't think. I think there's a lot more we should be doing. We should have a stronger voice. It's very seldom you hear an architectural expert when climate change issues are being debated. One of my closest friends is Roger Harrabin, the Today environmental correspondent, and I mean, when I ever asked him what are the big things we should be doing, you know, what are the how can we make a difference? And I think most architects want to make a difference. The guidance, a lot of people have different views. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, and every project is different. So having that advice would be hugely beneficial to architects up and down the country. Everybody wants to do the right thing. It's having the information in order to advise their clients what are the important aspects we ought to be looking at. But I think getting more communication, getting more visibility, and getting our experts in front of decision makers and politicians at a local, a national, and an international level is really important, because I don't think architects have all the answers, but we certainly have some of them. And I don't think 90% of the people in the country don't probably know that we have climate change experience, expertise, and you know, they think we design houses, and or they don't. It's part of getting the message across that we do have specialisms and we do have expertise, and getting them in front of the relevant people, pairing our experts with decision makers, I think is essential.
Thank you, Chris. Duncan.
The question is, what are you doing? I'm behind the scenes doing quite a lot, and sorry to, it's not a boast, but the UK Architects Declare brought out their building blocks to transform the built environment. The second point of those 3 points there is a circular economy. So I was heavily involved with that. That actually started as an exercise where we were meeting with the Labour Party and having discussions with them direct. So we were meeting MPs there, trying to in effect inform policy. So there's quite a lot of that going on behind the scenes. And a year or so ago, when Chris Skidmore brought out his net zero carbon plan, I was in meetings with him, because he was given the brief of proving that net zero was unaffordable, and he turned that on his head. And the person that gave him the brief was Liz Truss, so he had the guts to turn it on his head. So I think there's a lot of that going on in the background. That's why I've gone to the last 2 COPs as well. I was at Acan's opening launch event, and I did a talk there, and I was heavily involved with the circular economy talks that they did. I've until recently on the steering group of Architects Declare. So it's almost my full-time job being an advocate and a lobbyist on behalf of this one. So it's a bit unfair from the point of view asking that question, but yeah, it's what I do. And I would actually say there's one of the reasons I'm really excited about the RIBA and getting involved as president is because when I've seen the RIBA at COP, I'm just thinking, as I said earlier, doors open. And I think we're in a position to lead on this. I'm really excited also because of working with Letty. Letty are a real inspiration because you know, first climate emergency design guide. And the reason it's an inspiration is because it had over 1,000 people involved. And that set the sort of prototype for the UK net zero carbon building standard, because you've got all the institutions and climate and client facing groups working together initially on the Letty documents, but now on the UK net zero carbon building standard. And that's why I think that will happen. And that's why I think that's the most important issue. As soon as we legislate for embodied carbon, we're in a different world. And I think there's quite a lot of work going on in the background, and I'm involved with some of it.
Thank you, Duncan.
So I'm sure the question was, how would we be involved with groups such as Architects Declare, etc. So again, I can't remember whether it's Architects Declare or Acan, but I was a personal signatory to when I think it is Architects Declare, to be honest.
That's Architects Declare, yeah.
Yeah, when that first came out a few years ago, I signed it as an individual, as a newly qualified architect. It's something that I've always supported, and I've taken through in how I design my projects as a project architect. It's something that I have a very strong awareness of, again, from the background of seeing the effects of all of these issues. It's not something that is somewhere far away. It is in my community, and it's something that affects people that I know and love. In terms of how I would engage with these, this is bringing the experts on. I can acknowledge that there's a lot of work that's already been done by many more people who are expertly skilled. And the job of the president is to connect people and bring people into the rooms, know where, basically network with people and see how you can get these discussions elevated. That would be what I would be doing. I found myself somehow into a parliamentary discussion with, it was like a committee where they got the local people in, and there was no architect in that room. The attitude of people in that environment was architects were useless and had actually caused majority of the problems on the estate. It was about the housing crisis and how the government can deliver better social housing. So somehow I've been able to find my way into those rooms just by talking to the right people and networking. I will continue that. It's a skill that is very, very important. And I think having the humility to admit when you need to bring in help is something that is such an important role in this, and making sure that you will contact and reach out to as many people. And one thing I would also finally like to add is that in the discussion of the climate emergency, we must never forget the community of people, because that is the end game. We must never forget the people who are affected by these. So as much as we have all of our statistics and things, we should always be reflecting and connecting sustainability from a physical aspect and carbon and our supply chains, but also looking into the people and the affected parties. So that is something that I would also be putting at the forefront in how we collaborate with all of these different groups to make sure that there is a balanced group of experts all speaking the same language and committed to the same things, end goal.
Thank you. Just an update, we've got about 12 questions left and we've gone through 6. So apologies for the expediency, but I'm trying to get through as many as possible. I would like each candidate to explain how long you've been on the council until now, and during that time, how far you've taken us towards your current goals.
I've been on council twice, once under David Rock, who asked me to join. And then Marco Goldschmied became president. And they were interesting times. So under David Rock, I had the role of chairman of the Architecture Centre. And this was at a time when Victoria Thornton ran it. And it was a really vibrant institution. We got sponsorship from lots of different companies. We put on the most amazing exhibitions, some blockbuster exhibitions. Renzo Piano was one of them, but also lots of really interesting locally generated and community-based exhibitions. The building was alive with lectures and with exhibitions. And then I came back to council after a period of about 10 years when I was asked to stand again, and I was president. I was what was the title? Business Skills Ambassador under Jane Duncan. So to try and promote business skills, and we published some documents about that, and I set up a website called architectskills.com, just because the RIBA website hadn't got the technology to host it. And on that, there was a series of practical guides to how to acquire the right sort of business skills to run a business, and great presentations by people like Peter Murray and Paul Finch and Roger Golovich, how to liaise with your clients. And then under Ben Derbyshire, I was Vice President International. And that's why I have this great passion for extending the RIBA internationally. I think we can be the head of a great global community. But I think I've made a lot of difference. But in the past, there's too much swapping and changing between the aims of the president. That's what stopped progress in the past. I think the RIBA has been reformed, and there is much more continuity. The president's role isn't as powerful as it used to be. It's more of a figurehead role, which is still a very important role, but the way that the Constitution is currently set up will help a lot in getting a much smoother continuity between the presidents.
Thank you. Funmbi or Duncan? Again, I'm going to urge you to be a bit expedient.
Okay, well, I can be quite quick. I've been on council for 3 years, and I was actually elected with a couple of other members sort of on the sort of climate emergency ticket. So we got the Climate Action Expert Advisory Group put together, formed. Since that was formed, we got the climate emergency being one of the RIBA board's key issues that it was going to address. We've gone to the last 3 COPs, and we've also, as I said earlier, the mission and purpose of the RIBA has been changed to put people and planet before profit. In addition, retrofit, we've been lobbying for retrofit to be out there as something that's discussed all the time. And I think you're here with the current president, he talks about retrofit a lot. So I think we've made retrofit and the potentials and the positivity that could be within that industry front and center. In addition, there was a circular economy exhibition at the RIBA at Portland Place that then went up to RIBA North, which I helped curate as well. And that, I think, happened because of the consensus of understanding on the council, because there's an increased level of climate literacy in the council.
Thank you, Duncan. Funmbi?
So I've been on the council. I was elected in September last year, and since then I've been able to put forward discussions in council on working conditions with collaboration with other parties, as well as raise the issue of international fees, and also just the general fees in terms of the cost to students and then also the visa issue on the recent changes to immigration. So in the 2 meetings that I've been part of on council, I've already brought a lot of things up. I was actually one of the key signatories to, was one of the nominators for the current president. So my time in terms of trying to push the RIB for having a more progressive outlook has started way long before that. And I actually joined council as somebody in order to support this movement, rather than sitting behind the lines, kind of getting into the ring. So in the short time that I have been on council, I have been taken every stance and every single occasion to raise the things that I have been nominated on. I am being great. I'm also now, again, within since September, co-chair to the Accessing and Finding and Accessing Architecture EAG, and been trying to push for that. I've attended many conferences. It's been a period of learning in order to learn and understand how the organization works and how it's structured, so that, again, in order to meet the points that I've been elected to, I am making sure that I'm making the most effective connections and bringing people together into the room and connecting all the dots where there are definitely gaps. That's the short.
Thank you, Funmbi. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rushed. You do take the time you need to answer the questions. So the next question, knowledge and skill sharings are incredibly important to addressing the climate and biodiversity crisis. This is a two-part question. Can you please set out your position regarding the salary thresholds for skilled worker visas introduced by the UK government last year? And how can the RIBA work with the government or work with architectural practices to make it easier for overseas professionals to work in the UK?
Can I take that one first? Because it's something I've been campaigning on. So I'm an international. Actually, the government brought into this salary threshold back in 2014. So it's not something that is new. They've just increased it. And unfortunately, because of the stagnant salaries that we've had in architecture for the last 20 to 30 years, we are no longer compatible with what the government metrics of a skilled worker is. I believe that we should be doing as much as possible to support people, especially those who are already in the country, because they've started on this long journey, which is a 7-year minimum commitment, and the average tuition fee for an international student. So it's between 20 to 30K every single year, just purely on tuition fees. I presented a good amount of data to council to try and just get people to start to understand the numbers. The numbers for home students are also ridiculous. The numbers for international students are up to 3 times that amount. And these are people of our international community that we say that we're so proud of. So why are we not supporting them? The immigration is a very complex thing. I know I've been to court with the Home Office when they tried to remove me. It is something that there are routes and ways, and the problem we have is there's 2 issues. The route to architecture is not really compatible with the visa system. I think the RIBA should be working actively with various groups to try and sort out that. That includes working with ARB, because this is a problem that we cannot solve on our own. We need to work with all the parties involved and the Home Office, and be proving to them that, you know, the route of architecture, similar to medicine, is something that is a complete education package, because that is the core of the problem that people who come into the country to train have. As for people who are coming, who are already architects coming in, we've gotten MOUs, memorandums of understanding, but now with the visa situation, there's a disconnect, because how do you actually transfer over? So we really need to work hard domestically, so we don't keep falling into the same pit holes of not having the right salaries to even meet simple government policies. But we also need to be educating the government that architecture and the exchange of architectural designs and architectural professionals within the UK and abroad is something that needs to be protected. So that is what I would say to that issue.
Thank you. Duncan.
You know, this issue, it feels more difficult to tackle than the climate issue, because it's the big political issue at the moment. It's absolutely disgusting what's happening. It is so difficult for students who are not resident of this country to study architecture. And, you know, I don't know, the way it's being discussed in politics at the moment is absolutely dreadful. So it's something I see all the time with my students, and the huge amount of debt they've got. And it also means there's, you know, I don't know, it's certainly not a route for people who haven't got a lot of money. It's so dreadful at the moment. Now, what I think we need to do, it's not just RIBA and ARB that need to talk to each other, it's the whole industry, because, you know, we need to get everybody behind us to do this. And I think it's a bit similar to the climate emergency thing. We need to work beyond just architecture, because it is difficult for architects, but it's also difficult for medics. So I just think what we've got to do is talk beyond the RIBA and the ARB, and anything else I'll say is on top of what Funmbi will be repeating what Funmbi said. But at the moment, I'm just so impressed with the students that are actually able to turn up with the stresses that they have, the work that they're having to do in addition to studying. So it's for me, if I was president, it would be up there with the climate issue. That and this would be the issue that I'd be tackling with ministers, with ministries, and I would hope that the door would be open to listen to the RIBA, but I hope I'd be in that room with the ARB and the other institutes and the other big employers in our construction sector.
Thank you. Just to say that we've got 10 minutes left, so.
What, 20 questions?
Any questions? Chris,
Just yes, no from now on.
Yeah, so I think this is an important issue, not just for people that are still studying, but people that are working. I'm aware that people who are working since the threshold's been raised are now being faced with the possibility of not being able to have their visa renewed. The government doesn't seem to understand that people from overseas bring enormous benefits and money into the economy, and I think it's something we ought to. I've been to degree shows for the last 40 years, and looking at if a student was from Spain or Portugal or Italy for the last few years, they've been relatively easy to hire, but if they were from Korea or China or Brazil, they were incredibly difficult to hire. I was hoping, if there was any hope, that after Brexit, it would create a more level playing field so that you could hire the brightest and the best in the world. That's the situation that I would like to get to, and be able to. I think as a professional institution, we should be able to say to the government, look, we know who we want. We know the workers that we want. We know the skills that we need. Why can't you let us hire them?
Right. Thank you very much. Moving on, I am going to try to ask some questions that are a bit different. There is a question about accessibility. So it's unbelievably hard to break into the field, particularly for those needing financial stability and those that come from low-income backgrounds or without a support or professional network. What can the RIBA do to support that?
This is something I'm passionate about, because my mum would have never have let me study architecture with the debt that currently people have to go into in order to qualify. And there's such a huge drop-off rate between people going into part 1 and people actually finishing part 3. I mean, I feel incredibly guilty in a way, but incredibly very happy to receive not only a grant, but my tuition fees paid as well. And I realize why that can't happen now, but it's just got completely skewed, and we have to get better routes into architecture, more apprenticeship courses, which means more. Everybody works incredibly hard, as Duncan's already alluded, whether you're studying part-time or full-time or on an apprenticeship course. It's incredibly onerous, but there should be more diverse routes, and I keep banging on about lifelong learning, but I think one of the advantages of that is you can choose your own career path with lifelong learning, and you can go into architecture and decide when you want to qualify as a part 3. Lots of people don't. You can still work incredibly well within the architecture system without qualifying as a part 3, but we should have more diverse routes to qualify.
Thank you, Chris. Funmbi or Duncan, would you like to add to this?
Me can go next.
Yeah, so I believe, yeah, we need to understand that the architecture training that as we have it, the standard model doesn't work for a lot of people. So again, as Chris has said, adding more diverse routes, recognizing apprenticeships, but also making the apprenticeships a lot more easy, because the current system is actually quite flawed and isn't really open to a lot of people. So in fixing the apprenticeship system, that addresses one aspect of it, but we need to have more flexibility about how people come in and out of the profession, bringing people from other things, having more diversity into that, so that someone who then those members who didn't follow the traditional route are able to enrich the profession as well, and also breaking down what we do to the core things. So the 7-year route, what are we actually trying to get our graduates to understand in that? I think that needs to be heavily reviewed, and to make sure that everybody's coming out with the right skill sets that will get them, the salaries and things that and pay they need. at the end of it, and also give them opportunities to do other things as well. So making sure that we're coming out at the end of the 7 years or however long it takes you with a robust set of skills to stand on your own and continue your learning, and that mindset of continuous learning, but also that people can come in at different points, and there's not like a cultural barrier that you've come in through one route, therefore you're less inferior. We need to set those targets and have everyone agree on that as a core.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll be brief. I agree with Funmbi that the apprenticeship scheme needs to be tailored to our industry. It's not working at the moment. I barely know any students who are able to do it in our industry, but I know a lot of students that are finding our industry too daunting to hang around with. So I'm a real advocate for an apprenticeship type scheme. I'm also, last year I gave an award, a postgraduate award, for, we do this Waste House Award for Circularity to a postgraduate student. And when I got to talk to him, it turned out that his degree was in product design. And for me, he got other awards that year. He was the standout architect in our master's school last year. And he can't qualify at the moment because he's got the wrong degree. That's silly. We've got to be more flexible. And the one thing I'll add to, because everything that's been said so far I subscribe to, the RIBA has got to come to the table and start talking with the ARB and SCOSA and get this sorted out, because we're going nowhere with the system at the moment. We're just making it very difficult for young people to qualify as architects. We need to support them. We don't need to give them any more challenges. The subject's difficult enough as it is.
Thank you. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to do a bit of a fire round. 2 questions left, a minute each to answer, maximum. I do believe that some of our candidates have a hard stop at 5:30, so we can't stay on any longer. So question 1, how could the RIBA do more to improve climate literacy amongst clients?
It needs to be talking to them. It needs to be talking to them and doing CPDs to them.
Great.
Yeah, we need... Was that it, Funmbi? We really quick.
We have to be quick.
We need to be hosting events that invite clients, and we need to get Chris has alluded to it. We need to get the sort of world experts in all these different subjects in the same room with our clients and our members, and have amazing events and learn stuff.
You could use Acan.
We could use Acan. We will use Acan. Of course.
I also think it has to be done by legislation. I mean, I've been involved with so many clients of the year that it's very difficult to persuade them to do anything if they don't have to do it. We need more legislation to... I
just thought I'd say something different, but it is legislation, Chris.
Okay.
We need a carrot and a stick.
We're agreed on that, yeah.
Okay, and thank you very much for the final question. There have been a lot of comments about the relevancy of the RIBA for architects today. How do you propose to activate the RIBA to be a more relevant organization for architects?
I'll go first. So I believe the RIBA needs to start to listen to the wider community. It needs to be a reflection of the wider community, and that is how we will get people in. We need to be able to see ourselves in the organization, and that reflected back in the actions and the behaviors within our industry and how we speak. So in order to be relevant, you have to actually be there and also be addressing all of these key issues that are of this generation, of this time. So we need to be addressing them with the strength and importance that the current generation attributes to all of these. So the climate emergency, in diversity, genuine diversity, inclusion and equity, and the cost of the value of the architect, the cost of everything, and the cost of being able to practice. We need to be addressing these things, and not as nice to have, but as urgent matters.
I think we need to be widening the community. So we do have 50,000 members, but we could do with 70,000 members, to be honest. So I think we need to be much more inclusive. We need to go out there into our primary schools, secondary schools, and we really need... I mean, I go to primary and secondary schools quite often, and the kids are always so excited to be talking about the built environment and architecture. We need to be engaging with a bigger community. I think that's one of the most important things. So we do need to talk to, engage with our regions, but beyond that, communities within that region, within those regions.
I think each of us have given all of our thoughts in our manifestos. It's up to people to choose which one they like. I mean, I think there are so many issues that we need to address, and there are so many issues around the corner as well. I mean, we haven't even spoken about artificial intelligence, and everybody can be an architect now. Everybody can design their own kitchen. Everybody can design their own house or create their own visuals, and get them built. That it's going to be a huge issue for us, and we have to be more empathetic. We have to get different skills if we're going to keep ahead of artificial intelligence and other people that will be using it.
Thank you. A big thank you to our candidates for answering. I appreciate it was a bit rushed. I think we could talk the whole evening. And yes, it's a pity we don't have more time. But I want to thank you very much for taking the time.